Hello, everyone. Welcome back to St. Louis Teens. We are honored to have with us today Vice President Phillip Gaskin, who is the Vice President of Entrepreneurship at the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation that builds and supports programs that improve education, boost entrepreneurship, and help America's heartland thrive. Mr. Gaskin, you catalyze the entrepreneurial ecosystem and work to explore and solve the challenges that entrepreneurs face in America's heartland. This includes the states of Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, and Nebraska. Mr. Gaskin, thank you so much for your service to our country and for being here with us today.
Thank you. Looking forward to this. Thanks so much for having me.
Mr. Gaskin, thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to go into entrepreneurship and philanthropic service, and how has your journey been like so far?
Thank you. Yeah, it makes me think back to my father when I was a kid. My father and I were very close, and we used to go everywhere together. And one of the places that we went to a lot was the bank. And I noticed that we went to quite a few banks. And one day I wondered to myself, why do we go to so many banks? And it turns out that, so my father was an aspiring entrepreneur. And one of the reasons why we went to so many banks was because he kept getting turned down for a bank loan. And the reason why he kept getting turned down for a bank loan was the color of his skin. It was because the zip code we lived in. It was because his credit score was probably just a few points too low. And these systemic type of barriers and issues just got in the way. And it took him 4 years to finally get a bank loan. And you want to be in a situation to give back to entrepreneurs, and to have entrepreneurs not have to face the barriers that I faced, watching my father grow up and growing up in neighborhoods and in systems where I'm sort of say I'm a product of living through the division and the disconnected systems and discriminatory practices and all that. So it's one of the reasons when the Kauffman Foundation opportunity came up, I jumped at the chance, because it's sort of like my entire life sort of coming back full circle and me being in a position to try to change things.
And we're so thankful that you chose this journey and you're going through on this path. And I know it can be difficult, but if you had to sort of pick one part of your work that would be your favorite, what would that be? And what would your favorite aspect about our country be as well?
Well, of my work, I would say it's the connectedness. So it's the realizing that entrepreneurial ecosystems have to be more connected, so that, and inclusive and fair, so that entrepreneurs don't go through what my father did. Don't, just figure out, not figure out a way. Too many entrepreneurs can't figure out a way to, how do I get through this maze in my community of who I should talk to for capital, who I should talk to for resources, who should I talk to for mentoring? And it gets so tiring that too many of them just give up and say, forget it, I'm going to go do a day job or something. And so the favorite part, and it's our entire strategy is around how do we strengthen entrepreneurs and how do we strengthen communities to be more connected and inclusive and supportive of that. And for our country, we have all of that in us. We have all of that in us. And, we are very, we pick ourselves up. We're very independent when it comes to, charging forward through capitalism and that spirit that we have. Challenge is we're not interdependent enough all the time. And we have crises in our nation. We have 9/11, we have the Great Recession, we have COVID, what's going on now, and we rally together as a nation. But in between the time we sort of fall back apart and we get a little bit too comfortable, when we do that, the inequities just continue to grow. So, but the passion I've got about our country is I know we have it all in it, the fabric, how connected we can be. And that's why we're the great nation that we are.
And Mr. Gaskin, with your work helping entrepreneurs and organizations in the Midwest, what are some of the hurdles that are unique to America's heartland, and how can we overcome them?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, the heartland is what a unique, the 4 states we call the MINK states, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas, as you mentioned. What a gift of diversity of geography, of gender, of race. We have rural, we have urban, we have suburban, we have an urban edge. And so the common denominator is still goes back to connectedness and opportunity. So rural, broadband access in rural is still a challenge for too many aspiring or entrepreneurs. Capital, of course, across the spectrum, and we know that 83% of entrepreneurs do not access a bank loan or venture capital. And 83% of entrepreneurs don't. That holds for the middle of the country here. And so, so if we look at venture capital alone, of the $21 billion worth of venture capital in 2018 that went out, it went to basically five geographic locations, these clusters: Silicon Valley, Orange County, California, Los Angeles, New York, Boston. 75% of all that money went to those locations. And so what about the rest of the country? What about us? What about the heartland? And so from a COVID-related perspective, and we're seeing it just like the rest of the country is seeing the challenges for entrepreneurs, is that, we had the Paycheck Protection Program, the loans just didn't go to enough people. One thing you may not know, many entrepreneurs, small business owners, don't have really a close relationship with their banks. But the PPP loans were primarily distributed through banks. There was this disconnect. We have so many entrepreneurs in the region just had to try to scramble and figure out, how do I get a loan? I don't have a relationship with the bank, or the one that I do have a relationship with isn't one of the ones in the program. And so, that's capital, connectedness, are two things that, and access I mentioned, from a broadband perspective, but those are some of the challenges that we see.
And can you share with us some of the success stories of entrepreneurs that you work with and success stories of the Kauffman Foundation?
Sure. Thank you. Well, there's an entrepreneur that I know that actually lives in my building, who runs a furniture store, actually makes furniture here in Kansas City, and got really creative, was able to pivot his business to make masks, and to start making masks during COVID of all different colors and patterns. And now he's making, as a product line, in masks that they're probably not going to give up, while he's also trying to make the unique furniture. And that's certainly a success story. We see other success stories like that. Backlot Cars. I don't know if you're familiar with Backlot Cars. They, an organization here based in Kansas City, they've just now had a $425 million exit. And, so that's wonderful, where they've started up, made good money, and you have folks exiting because they're going to be exiting because they're being acquired by someone else. But that sort of puts Kansas City on the map as a technology community, because it's a tech organization. It didn't necessarily advance an inclusive mode of entrepreneurship, but it just showed that in these times right now, there are organizations that are being seen and are having some success stories. So those are just two totally different ones, from an entrepreneur of a 1 or 2 employee business to a much larger one.
And Mr. Gaskin, from your past experience as a political strategist and consultant with the U.S. presidential campaigns, how can policy support entrepreneurship, especially in distressed communities, and how do we accelerate that support during this election cycle?
I'll call your attention to something that we released about a year ago called America's New Business Plan. It's a 21 policy recommendations that are geared for advocates to inspire or to create better conditions for entrepreneurship. Here's what I mean. So those advocates, we want to advocate for entrepreneurs, are policymakers, local, federal, and state policymakers that can, we urge them to adapt these policies. They sit in the 21, but they sit in 4 pillars: opportunity, knowledge, funding and support. How can more entrepreneurs, how can policymakers create better conditions so entrepreneurs have more opportunity in their cities, can get access to funding and know where to find it, knowledge, the knowledge that they need, and so it is. You can go to startusupnow.org to learn about the coalition. There are 190 organizations now that are in the coalition that are doing the advocacy to the policymakers. Well, we're a philanthropic foundation, so we can't lobby or do anything like that. But we've created a coalition around the nation of organizations that they've joined on to the coalition and are doing that type of advocacy. It's so important at the policy level. And, I saw it as a community organizer and being in political campaigns where you're grassroots, you're knocking door to door and calling citizen by citizen to just understand what are your issues, what are your challenges. And we would hear, I wish my local representative would do this, or I'm hoping that my senator hears me, or what have you. And now being able to do that here at Kauffman is really exciting.
And through my personal experience with my social initiative, helping those fighting homelessness start their own business and become entrepreneurs, I am so thankful for all the donors and the local businesses that have supported my vision and this work. It wouldn't have been possible without their generous support. And we see these inspiring stories of generous philanthropists sharing their capital for the betterment of our communities. And unfortunately, on the ground, these stories are often different. People are often unaware of several resources and they feel inaccessible. How can more people and all people access these valuable resources?
Well, I'll take it from a Kauffman perspective, and you bring up a fantastic point here, that, and this goes back to why we do the work and trying to make ecosystems more connected and provide more tools and resources, because why doesn't everyone know why it should not be so hard to find those type of answers. But one of the things I mentioned our America's New Business Plan, but from an entrepreneur learning perspective, our 1 Million Cups program, now in over 170 communities. These are our weekly meetups for entrepreneurs to meet with folks that support entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs, 9 a.m. Wednesday morning around the nation, every Wednesday morning, in all these communities, an entrepreneur or two stand up in front of a crowd of supporters and just talk about where they are in their journey. And these are volunteer-led across the nation, and anyone can access them. So feel free to go to our website and look for 1 Million Cups. There's our Fast Track program, Kauffman Fast Track, which is both affiliate-based and online learning. That's another way to learn how to grow your business when you're an entrepreneur. And on our Kauffman playbook on how do you build an inclusive ecosystem. You can go to kauffman.org/playbook. What we're trying to do exactly is provide just as many tools and learning resources as possible, and democratize entrepreneurship, democratize opportunity to meet exactly what you're talking about.
And you talked about an individual in your building earlier shifting
Yeah.
your entrepreneurial venture from furniture to masks in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I have to ask, how has the COVID-19 pandemic changed entrepreneurship and philanthropy? And what are the keys to your success in navigating solutions during these unprecedented times?
Yeah, it's you'll hear a number of people say, because of COVID, I now know all the inequities and had no idea. And I'm going, they were already there. And so at Kauffman, the last 3-4 years, we've sort of been ahead of the curve. We have a systems change based strategy where we look at what are the systemic barriers that get in the way of entrepreneurs starting and growing a business, with a specific look at underrepresented populations. And it is those type of things that have to be looked at and have to be corrected. They're just exacerbated now because of COVID. The Band-Aids sort of come off, and it's like, oh my goodness, look at all of these different things. So COVID has over 40% of all Black-owned businesses have closed since COVID started. detrimental for Latino business, detrimental for Asian business, other business owned by people of color, and of course, women across that entire spectrum. Look at that. Look at that. And what's that going to take to rebuild? It's going to take a lot to rebuild. And so I'm fortunate to be in this role at this foundation, knowing that every day our work is more important now than it has ever been about how do we do work to close the gaps? How do we do work to expose the systems that are just broken, frankly, and fractured, and try to do it as quickly as possible. Cannot do it alone. We're one foundation, cannot do it alone. There's wonderful organizations out there across the nation doing this work along with us. But it's big work. So COVID, unfortunately, it had to be COVID, as well as the social and racial injustice that's came shortly after COVID broke. That it's learning that we all have to learn from and work on as quickly as possible together.
And Vice President Gaskin, talking about what we can do, talking about these solutions for these problems, your recent article on "We Need to Retain Our Independence" highlights the role of lawmakers, local chambers, nonprofits, and entrepreneurs in coming together and creating innovative leaders and solutions. In your opinion, how can teens and youth be part of that social leadership, innovation, and solution?
A big part. And it's what gets me really excited. Again, I didn't have the pathways. My dad didn't have the pathways. I was a kid growing up. I didn't have the pathways. But teens and youth, you have one thing that you have that I didn't necessarily have. You've got social media. You have tools. You have tools and technology and access in order to find networks and join networks and join social spaces in order to then find solutions and find ways to connect and pathways and that interdependence. So that's a real positive of technology and social media, is the ability to do that, because so many entrepreneurs before, in years past, really weren't able to do that as much. But there's what I say is I see youth, I hear youth, I value youth. I'm so excited about the brightness that you all have, and you are the change. You are the change that the nation and the world needs, and we're going to have. And so I'll stop there and see if I answered. I can on interdependence as well. I think that there's I think there are people in generations older than youth that can certainly do a better job in the listening, in the bringing along, in the mentoring, in order to provide youth pathways. Here, obviously, Kauffman Foundation, where we do the ARC, right? So it's about education and giving people an opportunity to learn and thrive early in the ARC, and then be prepared for real life learning experience, real world learning experiences, and going into entrepreneurship. So try to practice what I preach. And that's what I was talking about in the article. But everyone plays a role. So the mayor plays the role, the economic developer plays a role, the teacher plays a role. We all play a role in being able to create the pathways.
And I think that's so wonderful to hear and empowering to know that everyone has that opportunity to play a part in the solution and play a part in this leadership and innovation as well.
Absolutely.
Vice President Gaskin, we thank you for your phenomenal leadership and support of our entrepreneurs, our philanthropists, and the value that they bring to our country. And thank you so much for your time today and answering all of our questions.
Thank you so much. And anything else you all need, you just let me know.